PIRL Institute 2020, October 19th, 2020, Day 1, Session 3.
So it's the top of the hour, and we are going to start the third session for the day. Thank you so much for being patient and for being there. It's actually session 3, so that means in a while we'll be going to the last session. We want to thank the previous speakers. We want to thank Prof. Kometa for setting the pace, and now we are going to be focusing on some of the questions that you raised. Thank you, Alvin, Elizabeth, and Nin for the questions that you raised in the previous presentation. They are actually important, and we will be looking at some of them in this presentation. Welcome again, Abenwie. I can see you. He's one of our speakers, and who will be joining us to talk about quantitative data analysis. You all welcome. The aim of this session is actually to provide an opportunity for us to consider those key types of data and what it means to analyze them. And so we were just hurrying to see if there is any other person joining, but I hope, I don't know, Lynn, if you have the polls with you to share, just so that we check with people to know how they identify themselves as a researcher. Maybe they'll be able to respond to the polls, and we'll share the results in some minutes. Is it possible? All right.
Sorry, Luis, I don't have the right polls set up. I will try and set them up, and maybe we can do it a little bit later.
Thank you so much, Lynn. So we move ahead. Welcome to everyone. We are really, really excited to have this session following Dr. Kometa's excellent presentation on data analysis. In general, during this session, we will focus on analysis of quantitative and qualitative data. We will also consider analysis using mixed methods. We are going to hear from 3 researchers, and each of them has been given the same questions. We have also asked the panelists to share, they will also share a little bit of their work and any resources that are especially important to them. The answers are going to be different from each other, so please, we hope this session and conversation helps you to listen with an open mind so that you can learn about different approaches to research. We also hope that this session will be able to more clearly articulate what kind of analysis you do and why do you want to do that kind of analysis, and what you might want to do or to explore in the next few years in your projects or so. So I'm going to introduce the panel. We recognize that it's not easy to capture in a few seconds the kind of work that you guys have been doing, but we can try anyway. We also encourage you that you can get to these panelists after and engage in conversations with them That is also the essence of the Institute, for us to network. And if you are new to the terms that they will be using, please, there is an Institute glossary and some readings there. Maybe you can also read and get to understand some of the terms. We know that in our group, we have a wide range of experiences for those who are participating today. And there are people who are familiar with all these methods. There are also people who are just beginning, and many of you are in places maybe in between, maybe beginning, and also some of us are in between. So we just want to structure this session to be able to meet everyone, regardless of your experience. We hope you're going to gain something from there. There could be many contentious issues in doing research, but perhaps we agree that there is no one right way to do it. You will hear stories today in the readings and in discussions that you might just say, oh, I'm not sure this is the right approach. We ask that you listen and consider what each person is saying, especially in relation to disability inclusive development as well, and to disability inclusive research. And that these conversations should spur you to look further and to understand how you want to do research. Feel free, please, to contribute in our chat. We know there are some issues you could bear with us. Maybe we'll figure out, but feel free to share, contribute in the chat as we go through. Make a note of your comments and questions, and I am sure we're going to take them. There is some worksheet, if you like, to see how to take your notes. You could download it if you like, or just take your notes and get to us. Okay, let me go to the panelists now. We have with us the lady in glasses. She is called, all of them are in glasses, so you. She's called Abenwie. She is she works with the Cameroon Baptist Convention Health Services. She is a public health researcher, and she's a PhD student as well. And she uses a lot of quantitative data in her research, and does analysis using quantitative methods. And she will be sharing with us our experience today, her experience today, I beg your pardon, and we will be learning from her. People were asking questions earlier about quantitative methods, and I hope you're going to share with us a bit on that. We have the gentleman in glasses as well. He is Dr. Patrick Okwen. He is a very dynamic gentleman with a lot of skills, and he is leading the team in Mbibeh, Africa. He is a medic, trained medic, and a researcher as well. So we are glad to have you. He will be talking about mixed methods. I heard questions earlier asking if we could have in a research quantitative and qualitative. So Patrick will be sharing especially experience from the approaches, and you will maybe learn about each of those methods. We also have Jude, Dr. Jude Fokwang. I am hoping that he joins. He is at
He's here.
Oh, in the USA. Thank you, Lynn. So he is a great anthropologist, and he has been using a lot of qualitative data and analysis of such qualitative data. Dr. Jude, we are happy to have you in this panel, and we will be hearing from you. So I'm going to be moderating. I'm Mbibeh, and I'm a researcher as well, and mostly on inclusive development in general. I am going to moderate this panel. Thank you for accepting me to moderate and to lead these great researchers. So I will be asking them questions and they will answer. And in that discussion, we will all be learning and moving forward. So I'm going to begin right away. And I will be asking them question. I will ask question 1. The first key question that they are going to answer is we will love them to tell us about the type of information they like to gather. And maybe they could tell us about their approach and tools, and they could include some discussion about what are their stance, what is your stance as a researcher, and maybe what considerations you keep in mind on issues around neutrality, around objectivity, and you can compare your approach to other approaches if the little time I'm going to give you permits. I'm going to give you 5 minutes each, and I can start with Abenwie. Please, could you respond to the first preoccupation? Abenwie, you have the floor. Are you around? All right, I'm giving you a few seconds, maybe.
And good afternoon, everyone. Share some experience on quantitative. Okay.
All right.
Can you see my slides, please?
Yes, please, you can start all over again.
Okay. So, regarding my approach to research, each time, like Luis explained before, I am into public health research. And regarding quantitative research, before I engage in research, there is need to set up my objectives and then the research questions, which will guide whatever work is being done. So the data collection will be done based on the information, based on the objectives and the questions, and then the hypotheses that have been set in place, which will at the end of the day be tested to find out the responses or a solution to the questions that were initially asked. And then in order to do so, I ensure that the data collection tool is well developed and tested for validity and reliability. That is to say, the data collection tool will measure what it is intended to measure. So if it is to do analysis, to collect data or to test for a particular infection, if the data collection tool, if the instrument says the test is positive, or for a positive test, the instrument should read positive. On the other hand, we take reliability the data collection tool is made such that it is very reliable, such that if we repeat the same, if they use the same data collection tool to conduct information in a particular place containing, and even if it is another person using the data collection tool, the same answers will be collected to show that there is clarity of the data collection tool and we can rely on it to do the studies over and again. During the research process, I want to be very objective and neutral as possible. given that research, especially public health research or research as a whole, is an important activity, that the results will be used to guide decision making. There is need to be bias-free and be very objective, such that the result obtained could be considered seriously. And then once the data is collected, the next step will be to get insight from the correct data analysis process. So if the data is well collected and not well analyzed, we will not also be able to get the information that we need to get. So I ensure that I define data analysis as a process to take mass data and give meaningful insight to it, including looking to find patterns, connections, and relationships. It is a process of inspecting, cleansing, transforming, modeling the data, which is usually numbers when it comes to quantitative research, with the goal of discovering useful information, informing conclusions, and supporting decision-making. How to go? I usually go about quantitative data analysis. I have 2 steps to go about this, which involves preparation of the data and then the analysis proper. In preparing the data, we'll look at data validation. That is checking to see if the data was collected observing the standards that were set without bias. So there is a way that we'll review. We may need to get the questionnaire, go through and compare with the data that is collected to make sure that there is concordance in the way the data has been entered. And then there's data editing that is also done. Generally, with a large quantitative research usually contain a large data set, and typically there are errors that are made, or there's missing data, or incorrect filling of the fields. So that data editing.
Oh, you're surely having some issues with your connection, Abenwie. So, and I will suggest you adjust. We'll come back to that because I would love to hear other panelists' perspective, and then we come back.
Editing, we check for errors that are made. We check, correct them in using appropriate.
Are you with us? Can you get me? Abenwie? All right. So her connection is somehow. So we're going to go to the next panelist when she comes back. She was already quite a bit ahead. So when she comes back, we will get to her. But before then, I would love to ask Patrick now. No, before I go to Patrick, sorry, let me ask Jude. Please tell us about it, the kind of information you like to gather in your research, and what kind of tools you will use to analyze it. You have the floor.
Thank you. I think Abenwie is on. Can we get back to her? She's muted. Her internet is back.
All right. Abenwie, you had some little issues with your internet, so sorry about that. Are you getting us?
She's muted. Can someone unmute her?
Let me see.
Can you get me, please?
Yes, so that's fine. Please, you finish that slide, then I get to the others, and then you come back to the other slides.
Is my screen on, please? Can you see my screen?
Share your screen, please.
Okay. Sorry for the network problems. I hope you can get me now.
Yes, please. When you're done with that slide, then we'll go to the next panelist, and then we'll come back to you again.
Okay, that's fine. So I was saying that the editing is done to make sure that, okay, I had talked about editing. We're talking about coding the data based on the research objectives, based on the hypothesis and equations, depending on the age group. Say you want to, the question was asking about the age of the individuals. You want to compare statistics between people of different age group. On the coding of your data, you take that into consideration. And then the next thing is to classify the variables as maybe as dependent and independent variables, looking at the numbers of independent variables that we have in the different, in the study. And then we'll also check to see the variables, which are of them are the outcomes variable, whether they are categorical variables or they are continuous variable, all of which will guide the step 2, which is the data analysis process. And in the data analysis process, what the preparation phase guides the analysis process. And the important thing there is to know the statistical test that will be used to carry to do the comparison or correlation, or to find out the causal relation that exists between what we want to find out. So we can do this. It could either be descriptive statistics or inferential statistics. Initially, the descriptive statistics are meant to make observation on the data, how it appears, which could just be a common descriptive statistic like the range, the maximum value, minimum values, the frequencies, or measures of central tendencies like the mean, median, and the mode. And we also take into consideration their standard deviations. For inferential statistics, we look at which test to use, whether it is a parametric test or non-parametric test. And this is usually guided by whether the distribution of the characteristics in the population, and where it is normally distributed, we could use the parametric test. We also look at the nature of the variables, whether it is continuous or categorical, will guide the type of test that we use, and the number of variables that are available to tell us whether we are using a univariate analysis or multivariate analysis. We also look at data points, whether we are comparing data to different data sets, or we want to make a comparison within the same data set. All of these will guide the kind of test that we will use in the data collection process. So these are some of the things that are taken into consideration when doing the data analysis. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, then maybe I'll add some information then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We will come back to you as we progress, but I would love to hear from the other panelists as well. Let me give the opportunity to Dr. Jude Fokwang to respond to the very first preoccupation, to tell us a bit about the type of information you like to gather and the approach and tools that you use to analyze, and maybe a brief discussion about your stance as a researcher. Dr. Jude, you have the floor.
Thank you, Luis. It's a pleasure to be here, and good to see you all, especially some brothers of mine. Greetings to Dr. Okwen and Luis. Abenwie, it's a pleasure to meet you and to learn about your work. I look forward to hearing more from you all. Do you mind turning off your screen share so I can share something as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, I'm told I am unable to share my screen. So can the host permit me to share my screen, please?
Please just click on share again. Let me.
Okay, let's try one more time.
Yes, please.
Awesome, okay, I have that. All right, so let me just briefly introduce the kind of work I do. My name again is Jude Fokwang. I am Associate Professor of Anthropology and Development Practice. So a lot of my work is qualitative. I focus a lot on research that deals with interventions to improve the human condition. My anthropological work deals with trying to understand sociocultural phenomena. In other words, for instance, what would be the relationship between, let's take, for example, fertility rates and educational attainment amongst women. We could also, for example, ask, is there a relationship between, say, one's ability status and your political affiliation, right? Those are just hypothetical examples. And but we focus on listening to stories. And there are three major phases in the data analysis process for us. So I could relate to a lot of the things that Abenwie talked about. You know, we also do quantitative methods. And I would love to hear how, you know, you could mix those two from Dr. Okwen. So what kinds of data do we collect? Let's begin with that. Field notes would be the principal method for us to collect our data. So in my area of study, what we would do is we would have an ongoing interaction, we call it fieldwork, with participants, with people who you know, who are volunteered to be part of a study. Again, let's come back to our hypothetical example. So I'm interested, for example, in looking at the educational rank of females in, say, Bamenda and their fertility rate. What are the factors? Is there a relationship between those two? Can we assume that women with a lower educational attainment tend to have more children? Well, we don't know. Is there data to support that? Or is it the other way around? And so what I would do is I would go out to the field, formulate my research questions, all of those things. But how do I collect my data? I would collect data through an interview schedule. So I would use an interview schedule with a range of questions that I'll be asking my participants to respond to. I would develop field notes. So field notes would be detailed recordings of my interactions with them, their responses, the interview transcript. I may also look at secondary sources. Do they have statistics from previous era? Or has research been conducted on a similar topic before? What were their findings? So all of that would constitute my data. And so the first phase here is data reduction. The principal method I would apply in you know, reducing my multiple data sources would be coding. Coding would entail looking for themes, looking for patterns, and some of the variables that I'll be concerned about will be gender. I may be interested in ethnic affiliation or ethnic identity. Educational rank, of course, is another variable that we already talked about. And I'll be looking for patterns in their stories. What are the relationships here? There's a tendency to see relationships even when they do not exist. So you always have to guard against that and, you know, be very open-minded. And so this table kind of, or this chart here summarizes what my data analysis process would look like. And the final product, of course, is a report, if I were, you know, doing an applied research, or it would be an ethnography. An ethnography basically means a detailed account of some cultural phenomenon. So there are many processes here. I don't know if time permits us to go into all of that, but I want to address another aspect of the question that Luis asked, which has to do with neutrality and objectivity. I think you could also spec here that with qualitative research, there is a very significant tendency for people to be very subjective about the way they go about collecting their data. But also I think the fact that you as an individual, you the human being, becomes the principal instrument of collecting data, there's a very high tendency for, again, you know, subjectivity. So how do we see the process of neutrality, the process of applying objective methods? Number one, I think that, you know, the research process is what I would call an intersubjective one. It is, in other words, a co-creation between the participants and the researcher. You can easily, I think, appreciate this. When you use, say, for instance, a questionnaire and you ask people, how many times a week do you eat this kind of food? Or how long do you have to walk to X place? Or how often do you go to? They will tell you what they can tell you, right? And you have to trust whether they're being honest or not. But how do you know that? I think the ethnographic approach allows you to hang out with them on an ongoing basis. That means participating in their activities, listening to what they say, but also trying to identify maybe a discrepancy between what they say and what they actually do. So they're kind of building mechanisms to minimize subjectivity in the ethnographic research process. And we all believe that for scientific knowledge to be valid, at least there must be some level of objectivity. And we are very much, I think, attached to that notion. So I think I'd want to leave it here for now. I think I've exceeded my 5 minutes. But we can always come back to more of those questions, and I'll be happy to talk about, again, the process of qualitative data analysis. Thank you, Luis.
Okay, thank you so much for elaborating on especially qualitative analysis and your perspective on neutrality and objectivity, because that's where people would like to pin a finger on qualitative methods, in whether, how do you, where do you place yourself? Is it not the researcher's perspective rather than the participants? How do you, so many questions can be raised, and I'm happy you're throwing more light on the techniques of making sure that you check for against subjectivity. We have questions, we will raise them. And I think it's a very important perspective for us in this session about neutrality and objectivity in research and in the different methods that we are using. Let me get to Patrick and to tell us now to look at the two, what is from the perspective of mixed method design. Patrick, you have the floor.
Very much, Luis, I would like to say hello to all the participants, and especially to the two previous speakers who have already done a lot of justice to the work that to the topic that I'll be talking on. So I would like to dwell a little bit. It's going to be a light touch on mixed methods, and in essence, the advantage of mixed methods is that it gives both breadth and depth to a study or to a question that we want to answer. And I actually have two caps, the team lead at eBase Africa, which is an NGO that's promoting evidence-based interventions, and also the district medical officer of the Bali Health District. So at eBase Africa, as a policy, all our projects use mixed methods for impact evaluation. And the reason is mostly, as I said earlier, that this will help you to get both the breadth and the depth of the problem. So you can get the numbers, but you can also get the experiences, which can help you sometimes explain why numbers happen. And generally, the kind of information that we collect is we first of all kick off with gathering experiences or issues around culture. And in experiences, we'll be looking at what are the barriers, what could be some potential barriers to interventions, what could be facilitators, and for problems that people have, what are some of the coping strategies that they are using. And then we also explore cultural and religious influencers. And one particular thing that we do is also to collect geospatial data that represents experiences. It has quite some ethical issues around it, which generally speaking, this has not been fully expanded. I mean, and it was very interesting also with COVID, especially when people have to talk about their experiences with the government intervention, like mosquito bed nets. There's a tendency that if you collect their household roofs in geodata, they could be targeted maybe by the mayor or the doctor at the hospital because they know the house and there may be no confidentiality, or there would be difficulty in having confidentiality. And under quantitative data, we collect all the impact evaluation outcomes. I mean, the variables have been highlighted very well by Dr. Abenwie. Measures of central tendency, frequencies, all of this we also gather. But generally, as a practice, we do the qualitative data or the qualitative study or the formative study before moving on to the quantitative or the impact evaluation. And these are normally done through, just as Dr. Jude has said, through collecting transcripts or key informant interviews and focus group discussions or field work. To facilitate the task, we often use softwares, and these softwares have really been one of the key ingredients in our success at eBase. And this is because oftentimes we conduct these mixed methods to guide us to improve interventions that we want to roll out. So we may not want to go so rigorously, so we want to get something quickly in the beginning, and the software can actually give us this. For two main software that we use, for qualitative data, we use MaxQDA. This is a German software developed by some soft IT guys in Berlin, in Germany. And they are actually very good to development agencies and to development objectives. So they have given us access to their software for free. And in return, we've also given them tips around how this software could be modified for development. And we've had a very good relationship with them for like the past 5 years. We use this software for free. We use MaxQDA both to collect the data, and this includes gathering key informant interviews, focus group discussion, transcriptions, coding, and also analysis of the data itself. For quantitative data, we use MagPi. MagPi is a paid software, and it helps us to collect the quantitative data just as Dr. Abenwie has described. But it has the advantage that by the time you collect two data, you could actually go and look at how it is looking like, how the graphs are coming out, how the central measures of are coming up. So by the time you get to your complete sample size, you could also still see how this goes. So it really makes your work easier. Of course, this is not the end of your data analysis. To do your data analysis, you have to do a lot more work than just the software can do. It's beyond just the software, but it can give you a soft hand that you would have data, qualitative and quantitative, that you could quickly make decision or inform the progress of your intervention. Now, for supporting softwares that we use WhatsApp. The reason why we use WhatsApp is that sometimes we work with community health workers. For example, we do a lot of work in the Bali District Health Service and also in the Bamenda District Health Service. And sometimes you have to send people to the field. And sometimes you don't have so much money for research work, or to bring in data collectors who have the skills. You may need to bring people who are not people of the community. And with the conflicts, this could be problematic. We have had situations where data collectors have been kidnapped and things like that, or aggressed by military. So when you have the community health workers, these are people who are known by both the military and the separatist groups. So what happens now is that they can move around the community freely, but they may not have the skill to collect good data. So you may want to use WhatsApp as a medium where they will collect audios and load back into a forum that you are monitoring. So you can actually ask them to ask follow-up questions, and then you gather the data, then you have it, and you can now move this into Max QDA, you transcribe it, and then you can analyze your qualitative data. WhatsApp also gives you the possibility of collecting the geolocation of the participants, and also collecting pictures or videos that may be very useful for your intervention. We also use Google Maps as a supporting software, mostly to project our geolocations and to put our experiences in a geospatial qualitative data. So those are like the tools that we use for our data collection. Now, qualitative data helps us to inform the design of interventions and can explain bizarre results from quantitative data analysis. And we will see this in two examples that I will give shortly. And as I've said, we often use data collectors and community health workers most of the time to do the work. Now, some examples that we have that I can share here for why mixed methods may be very useful. It's about how we're evaluating the impact of mosquito bed distributions in Bali. So, and the question was, are bed nets effective in reducing new malaria cases in the Bali District Health Service? So we gave out bed nets, and we're hoping that people will use these bed nets and we will prevent them from having malaria, etc., etc. But we noticed that there were no changes in the trends. And so we went back into the community to talk to the people about their experiences with the bed nets. And we found out that a lot of them were using the bed nets either for covering their young crops or for fishing. Now, the reason why this experience is very important is that one big mama, one grandmother explained something to us that challenged our idea that we were experts. She said in the morning, she's threatened by hunger. In the afternoon, she's threatened by hunger. And in the evening, she's threatened by hunger. But the bed net only protects her from a threat in the night, which is the mosquito. So why will she want to use the bed nets to protect herself from malaria when she can use it to protect her young crops that are going to be eaten up by insects? So, and then you find out that the decision makers have actually made a poorly informed decision to just roll out bed nets without thinking about other things that could be more useful. Nets to protect their crops will be cheaper than the mosquito bed nets. So you see, this is how experiences could really inform an intervention and explain why something you thought that would happen did not happen. And then another good example is how experiences could have led to drug resistance in the treatment of malaria. Yes.
So thank you for that. Thank you for that example. It was really important to show us how you could use the mixed method. I think you will share the other example with your, you will share the other example later because you are available and people can get to you. I just want us to be within the time frame. So thank you very much. And ask all the panelists one question, and it will take you 1 minute to answer the question, and then so that we can end. We are 5 minutes to the end of our session. I want each of the panelists to think about disability inclusive research that we are doing, and to tell us from your perspective of analysis, what is any consideration that we should make. Thank you. We could begin with anybody. Let's begin with Abenwie. All right. From a quantitative perspective, doing disability inclusive research, what consideration should we have in mind? You have just a minute to tell us. All right. Abenwie? Or maybe you can unmute yourself. Huh? All right.
Can you get me?
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay. So, from the question, what I would say is that generally, data analysis is the most important component of research, and the researcher has to be objective and follow the rules of analysis, avoiding weak analysis produce inaccurate results, and not only hamper the authenticity of the research, but also make findings unusable. For quantitative research, the data analyst or the researcher plays a significant role at each step in the research process. Unfortunately, the data analyst is not often invited upon the data analysis part to follow through the research work, and there is always no opportunity to correct the data before it gets bad. Therefore, it is imperative to choose data analysis methods carefully and ensure that the analysis are well done in order for them to be actionable. And then for disability inclusive research in particular, the most important thing for me is that doing the statistical analysis requires a lot of skill in this area and expertise. And therefore, only experts should do statistical analysis so that it is done properly, be it for normal research or disability research, but then disability inclusive research. But since disability inclusive research include some more specific aspects that we need to pay greater attention, it is much more important to include an expert in analyzing such data. Thank you.
Thank you. There are obviously things that people may not agree because we're doing disability inclusive research and we want everybody to participate. And if we limit it only to experts, there is definitely something that other community members can do. Let us get to Jude because we don't have much time, please. The fact that I want you to come back to neutrality and objectivity as we do disability inclusive research. Louis, who is a disability activist, let me say so. If I go, how do I ensure that my findings are not based on my thoughts or on my viewpoint about disability, and that I am really neutral and objective? And how do we include your approach to research, qualitative research, in disability-related research?
Thank you very much, Luis. That's a good question. So the first thing I want to emphasize here is a full disclosure of one's method. The best way to establish the validity of any given scientific research is full disclosure of how you gathered your data, what that process entailed, and how you analyzed your data as well. So again, I think for me, coming back to the issue of objectivity, I really want to insist that for qualitative data, you know, we use questionnaires, we interview people, we interact with them. And as human beings, you have your likes and you have your dislikes. You may like one individual, you may not like the other person. And so there is always a temptation to, you know, let your own prejudices or your own biases to take the upper hand. And I think that in one way of minimizing that, of course, again, is to be able to say very clearly that here is what I did, so that readers and other users of your data can analyze whether this is reliable, this is objective stuff, or it's just a bunch of, you know, prejudiced info. Coming back to the issue of what's the one thing I would really insist on with respect to inclusive research, I would say data, your interpretation. So if you looked at my chart, interpretation is the key here. And there are two things included in interpreting your data, an emic or an ethic perspective. Emic is basically an insider. So are you taking into account the ideas of the people who have been involved in your research? To what extent are you able to kind of bring together those perspectives and maybe your own disciplinary perspective, the ethic, the outsider's perspective into conversation? So for instance, if I were to piggyback on the example Dr. Okwen gave about the woman in Bali using her, mosquito net for farming purposes, that would be a very good example. And I think of taking into account an emic perspective with respect to looking at how to intervene in future. Some researchers may be overbearing in terms of what they think maybe their expertise, their social status, and they would simply dismiss some of those perspectives as uninformed, as ignorant, and things like that. So I think there's a very strong call here for humility, for acknowledgement of data that may not necessarily tie in with what we anticipate, and a determination to ensure that both perspectives, in other words, the ones that belong to the people, whether they're extreme cases, they may not tie in with our theory or with our interpretation, but we should not discard those. So in inclusive research, this is the one thing that I would really want to emphasize as we embark upon these kinds of activities that will hopefully impact positively on our fellow humans. Thank you again, Luis, and my apologies for taking more than my allocated time.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you so much. It is for that very important perspective. Patrick, I will ask you to look at disability inclusive research and say one thing that we should consider, especially using mixed methods.
Yeah, it's hard to say one thing we should consider, but I think getting, if you want this mixed methods to be inclusive, getting people with disability in the stakeholder sessions to prioritize the outcomes that you want to measure in your quantitative data, and then also ensure that you have a consensus group that would take consensus on a number of things, how you decide what outcomes you want to measure in your qualitative study and in your qualitative component and your quantitative component. And you should have a person with disability on this group. From an experience that we are doing right now in education, we do have people with disabilities on the consensus group, because you may not be able to find researchers who are people with disabilities that would have the time to work full time and be paid. So that's like basically it. Yes.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you so much, Abenwie, who joined us from Yaoundé in Cameroon. That's the capital of Cameroon. Thank you, Jude, who joined us from the US. And thank you, Patrick. I think you're in Bamenda. Thank you to all the panelists for being so patient and listening to all the different perspectives. It was a huge task for you to take just a few minutes to be able to explain these approaches, and that is why we encourage that we should get to the panelists. we have their contacts and so on, and we can ask them all the questions that we want to ask. And as the Institute goes further, we'll be looking at each of these perspectives, and we will also be going detailedly into what they have said. Please, if you have your questions, keep them coming. I want you to clap for them in any way. You could send a message of thanks, and we are so happy. We'll get a break. This time our break is just 5 minutes, and we have the last session coming up, and we're looking at qualitative analysis from the PIRL survey that we did. Thank you. Let us go for break, a short break, and come back. Bye. For now, 5 minutes. We'll be back.